Look at the people surrounding you today. The vast majority of men navigating modern life were never conditioned to hold true authority. They were trained to be compliant, predictable, and polite. They are the individuals who instantly answer every call, fixing everyone else's chaotic lives while their own ambitions deteriorate. Perhaps your family taught you the value of relentless labor, absolute transparency, and unconditional courtesy. On paper, those are noble traits. But did anyone ever explain how to command absolute respect across a crowded room without uttering a single syllable? Did they teach you that being constantly accessible diminishes your value? Did they reveal that ironclad emotional restraint dictates whether you dictate the game or serve as a mere instrument within it? Probably not. Most generations before you were conditioned under the exact same blueprint. They were trained to blend in, to cooperate, and to seek safety, not to conquer. They passed down the mechanics of survival, not the architecture of absolute sovereignty. They educated you on how to exist within a system, not how to sit at the absolute top of it. Here is the cold reality that society desperately tries to cover up. This world has zero respect for compliance. It never has, and it never will. The world bows exclusively to leverage, calculated execution, and unshakable discipline. It bends to the individual who cannot be swayed, blackmailed, or manipulated. Today, you are going to receive the education that should have been yours from day one. This isn't about pointing fingers at the past. This is about rewriting your future execution. We are dismantling modern delusions and replacing them with pure, unfiltered Machiavellian strategy. These are the brutal laws that divide the rulers from the subjects, the architects from the labor force. If you are ready to discard comforting lies and adopt raw leverage, drop this exact phrase in the comments right now. I choose leverage over validation. Let's see who possesses the stomach for true execution. 1. The death of naivety and the birth of realism. You were brought up inside a beautifully manufactured illusion, a sterile bubble engineered to keep you manageable, harmless, and completely obedient. The academic institutions, media narratives, and parental advice all chanted the exact same hymn. Be a good person, follow the rules, and prosperity will naturally land at your feet. They told you to defer conflict, practice absolute transparency, and place blind faith in the concept of universal justice. Because you were young, you swallowed the poison. You assumed the adults around you had decoded the matrix of life, so you mirrored their exact steps. Then, the real world delivered its first unvarnished strike. The moment you stepped into the arena of actual competition, a terrifying truth became instantly clear. Nobody cares about your pure intentions. No corporate ladder rewards you simply for being a nice guy. The game is fundamentally asymmetric. People deceive. They exploit loopholes. They wear masks of friendship while calculation runs deep in their minds. Ready to discard you the microsecond your utility expires. Suddenly, you are paralyzed by confusion and resentment. You feel profoundly cheated because the playbook you were handed does not align with the actual competitive terrain. You are told that absolute honesty always triumphs. Yet, you watch calculated deceivers seize the grand prize. You are told that silent, grinding labor guarantees success. Yet you watch individuals with strategic networks leapfrog past you. You are told that treating everyone with golden gloves ensures mutual respect. Yet your unconditional loyalty is continuously treated as free real estate. Niccolò Machiavelli exposed this precise human architecture half a millennium ago. It is a reality that standard upbringings completely ignore, but one that you must embed into your psyche immediately. He who neglects what is done for what ought to be done sooner effects his ruin than his preservation. The matrix of power does not accommodate the innocent. It belongs exclusively to the hyper-rational, the strategic, and those who look at raw human nature exactly as it operates, adapting their moves without a single ounce of emotional hesitation. Your youth left you entirely exposed to cruelty because you were shielded from friction. Protection isn't training, it is a golden cage. It is a highly comfortable prison that ensures you remain fragile. Now, you are out in the wild, wondering why your pure heart is met with cold calculation. Let's stop the bleeding right now. Society values actual leverage, not moral purity. It fears discipline, it exploits naivety. The man who internalizes Machiavellian realism moves with an entirely different posture. He wastes 0 seconds complaining about structural unfairness. He doesn't whine about how human beings should behave. Instead, he decodes the hidden rules of engagement and masters them completely. You can waste your entire existence wishing the world operated like a fairy tale, or you can redirect that exact same cognitive energy into becoming powerful enough to dominate the world as it actually exists. Before we move to the next law, seal this psychological shift. Drop this line in the comments. I see the board clearly. 2. The trap of utility versus. True authority. Let's conduct a brutal inventory of your current social capital. When your peers, colleagues, or romantic interests think of you, what is their immediate psychological reaction? Do they sense an individual of immense gravitas, a man whose boundaries are ironclad and whose time is a premium commodity? Or do they view you as a convenient tool, a reliable Swiss Army knife they can pull out of their pocket whenever a crisis arises? Most men are stuck in the second category, completely oblivious to their own degradation. They have been systematically trained to be the ultimate fixer, the accommodating colleague, the good friend who drops everything to handle someone else's emergency. On the surface, corporate culture and social programming praise this behavior as a supreme virtue. But here's the Machiavellian trap you were never warned about. When you make yourself universally helpful, you are categorized as an asset, never an authority. You become a utility bill, not a leader. See the structural divide? This has nothing to do with malicious cruelty. It has everything to do with game theory. Helpfulness completely devoid of rigid boundaries turns you into basic infrastructure. People walk all over infrastructure without ever thinking twice about its value. Machiavelli understood that the absolute worst position an ambitious individual can occupy is being completely indispensable to someone else's comfort without holding the leverage of authority. The moment your availability becomes entirely predictable, your premium value completely evaporates. You become a default expectation, taken for granted, fully replaceable. 3. High value through strategic scarcity. Let's run an immediate diagnostics test on your self-worth. When someone pings your phone, how fast do your thumbs fly across the screen to type out a response? If your default setting is replying within 30 seconds, you are actively driving your social and professional valuation straight into the ground. I know that contradicts every modern corporate manual that preaches hyper-responsiveness. But Machiavellian psychology operates on the laws of reality, not human resources propaganda. Constant, frictionless availability absolutely massacres your perceived prestige. When you are perpetually accessible, always waiting on the sidelines and ready to abandon your current focus at a moment's notice, you subconsciously broadcast a lethal message. My time is worth absolutely nothing. Value is dictated entirely by supply and demand. This is basic market economics, and human psychology mirrors it perfectly. Why do premium consumer assets, luxury timepieces, high-end real estate, elite masterminds command astronomical prices? It isn't merely because their physical components are superior. It is because they are intensely rare, They are intentionally kept out of reach for the masses. The absolute scarcity of the asset is the value. Your attention, your energy, and your physical presence are no different. The microsecond you distribute them like free flyers on a street corner, they lose all psychological weight. People stop assuming you're a default fixture in their life. They approach your calendar with immense caution. They treat your moments of attention as an earned privilege rather than an entitlement. Machiavelli famously put forth the calculation that if one cannot achieve both, it is infinitely more secure to be feared than loved. 4. Emotional restraint and strategic calculation. Let's dismantle the absolute biggest vulnerability plaguing the modern male psyche: unmonitored emotional reactions. For decades, modern culture has fed you a highly destructive narrative. Put all your feelings on display. Be entirely transparent. Let every raw emotion breathe in real time. In a highly secure private setting with an elite inner circle, emotional processing has its place. But out in the competitive arena of business, negotiations, and social hierarchy, raw emotion is an absolute target on your back. It is a highly exploitable interface that allows your competitors to steer you exactly where they want you. Think back to the last time an adversary or an unexpected crisis made you instantly furious, insecure, or defensive. What did you do? You reacted. You fired off an impulsive email, made a reckless statement, or executed a short-sighted choice dictated entirely by a temporary biological spike rather than long-term game theory. You walked straight into the trap. The moment an opponent can successfully dictate your internal emotional state, they own you completely. You become a highly predictable puppet. All they have to do is push the right psychological trigger, and you dance exactly to their rhythm. One calculated insult makes you reckless. One artificial compliment makes you blindly loyal. One manufactured guilt trip makes you surrender your ultimate leverage. Machiavellian control does not mean transforming into a hollow machine devoid of human feeling. It means mastering the critical chasm between internal sensation and external execution. An elite strategist experiences intense anger, cold panic, or sudden attraction just like any other human being. The difference: he places an iron curtain between that internal storm and his physical response. He observes his emotions under a microscope without letting them touch the steering wheel of his actions. That brief, calculated pause is where absolute power resides. While the undisciplined masses are reacting like volatile children to every piece of external data, the Machiavellian individual is sitting in absolute stillness, analyzing the hidden motives of the provocateur, projecting 3 steps ahead on the board, and engineering an optimal counterstrike. 5. Zero validation reliance and absolute sovereignty. How many critical career moves or personal choices did you stall over the last 90 days, simply because you were waiting for someone else to tell you it was a safe bet? How many major maneuvers have you completely archived because your immediate peer group, your family, or your social feed reacted with skepticism or disapproval? If your execution requires a green light from anyone else, you are not a free agent. You are a psychological hostage inside a prison, built entirely out of other people's opinions. The tragedy of the average man is that he surrenders his unique trajectory to acquire the fleeting validation of crowds whose own lives are completely chaotic. He shapes his professional career around what his parents deem respectable. He limits his entrepreneurial scale because his childhood friends might mock his ambition. He stays safely inside a conventional lane because bold, aggressive, high-risk moves naturally provoke the jealousy and criticism of the mediocre masses. By doing this, you trade away the absolute highest currency of human existence, autonomy. absolute self-sovereignty. True autonomy means executing moves based entirely on your internal compass and your strategic vision, completely indifferent to whether the crowd is cheering or booing. It means being thoroughly prepared to stand in absolute isolation for months or years if that is what the blueprint of your success requires. It means possessing the psychological armor to look at widespread misunderstanding and keep walking forward without a single stutter in your stride. Machiavellian minds do not run focus groups before they build empires. They do not look for a pat on the back before they execute a hostile takeover or launch a disruptive venture. They do not require a committee to validate their reality. They calculate the risks. They choose their target. They strike with absolute force. And they manage the aftermath with total accountability. They would infinitely rather fail on a spectacular scale pursuing their own grand design than live a safe, gray, miserable life, executing someone else's uninspired script. Machiavelli gave a lethal warning regarding this dynamic. A leader who pins his ultimate fate to the shifting goodwill and approval of outside entities will collapse the precise millisecond that artificial support structure evaporates. And make no mistake, it always evaporates. Human praise is incredibly fickle. Public opinion transforms with the morning weather. The only foundation that cannot be shaken is your own calculated judgment and your unyielding commitment to your own execution. 6. The architecture of high gravitas and presence lets correct a massive delusion that weak men constantly perpetuate. They believe that dominating a room requires talking over everyone, being the loudest voice in the room, and aggressively asserting themselves into every conversation. Absolute nonsense. Incessant talking is the ultimate hallmark of deep-seated insecurity. It is a loud, blinking neon sign that screams, "Please notice me. Please validate my intellect. Please accept my presence." True Machiavellian presence is quiet, grounded, and intensely heavy. The individual who commands the highest room leverage is rarely the one running his mouth at the head of the table. It is the individual who is entirely comfortable with total silence. It is the man who listens intently, processes human metrics with absolute clarity, and only speaks when his words have the leverage to completely shift the axis of the meeting. Look closely at real structural power in the modern landscape, not the loud, superficial characters on reality television, but the actual behind-the-scenes movers, the private equity titans, the elite strategists, the kingmakers. They don't ramble. They don't engage in frantic verbal gymnastics to defend their positions. They speak less, observe everything, and make every single phrase count like a precision strike. When you over-explain your actions, you dilute your authority. When you rush to fill an uncomfortable silence with nervous chatter, you broadcast that your environment controls your nervous system. Machiavellian psychology understands that silence is an offensive weapon. Silence generates intense psychological friction, and human beings are naturally desperate to alleviate friction. When you refuse to react instantly, when you let a calculated pause linger in a room, you force your opponents to start second-guessing themselves. They scramble to fill the void, over-talking, exposing their hands, and handing you the ultimate analytical advantage. This applies beautifully to physical presence. How do you occupy space? Are you fidgety, reactive, and constantly adjusting your posture to look agreeable? Or are you completely centered, still, and unbrained by external noise? Your physical state speaks infinitely louder than any verbal pitch you will ever deliver. Machiavelli knew that human perception dictates the entire game of power. If you appear desperate for acceptance, you will be treated as a subordinate. If you project a calm, mysterious, and highly calculated presence, the room will naturally defer to your weight. Stop handing out your thoughts for free to anyone who asks. Stop defending your choices against irrelevant critics. Get deeply, profoundly comfortable with the power of quiet execution. Let the world wonder what your next move is while you quietly watch them fall apart under their own lack of discipline. Let's establish that presence right now. Drop this in the comments section. Silence is leverage. Machiavelli noted that the absolute first method to evaluate the intelligence and capability of a ruler is to inspect the quality of the minds he keeps in his immediate circle. But the advanced strategic layer underneath that rule is this: the most formidable ruler is the one who chooses his circle entirely out of strategic synergy, never out of lonely necessity. He does not need anyone. He selects alliances exclusively based on mutual leverage and empire expansion. Stop running away from the quiet. Step entirely out of the endless social noise. Sit with your ambitions, map out your strategies, develop your skill sets, and construct an internal empire that requires zero outside applause to reign supreme. The crowd loves to scream about community, but the apex predator builds his domain in absolute silence. If you have read every single line of this blueprint, and you possess the unyielding resolve to transition from a useful instrument into a sovereign ruler of your own destiny, let it be known right now. Drop the definitive confirmation below, and never look back. I am the architect of my empire.